Without a doubt, Insomniac Games have been killing it ever since the release of Marvel Spider-Man on PS4 back in 2018. Not only did they fulfill and exceeded expectations with an amazing story and performances, stellar gameplay and bombastic soundtrack, but they also quite literally became Sony's number one studio during the launch period of PlayStation 5, kickstarting its launch with Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, a standalone adventure featuring Miles Morales' coming-of-age story, a new entry in the Ratchet & Clank series with A Rift Apart, as well as the release of Marvel Spider-Man Remastered, which boasts an impressive amount of reworked technical features and implementing new ones such as ray tracing. Back at launch, one of the most talked about points of the game was its web swinging, specifically how it made players feel like Spider-Man, due to how simple and concise it is, so much so it even spawned the infamous exaggerated swagger of a black teen line, which to the writer's credit, it's a really well thought out encapsulation of Miles' flamboyance while web swinging, but just worded weirdly. But today we're here not to talk about that, as the focus of our thesis is analyzing what makes Marvel Spider-Man combat enjoyable and expressive, and I'll come back to that word in a minute. Once again, I'd like to preface that this video will include minor spoilers to Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales respectively. Not so much for the sake of throwing info, but enough to inform of certain character abilities that share synergy with gameplay mechanics. To set the scene first, Insomniac takes on Spider-Man focuses on a more experienced and older Peter Parker, as he got the gist of how to operate as Spider-Man the hero and Peter Parker the person. Focusing more on Spider-Man, his level of expertise mostly comes from experience and quick thinking through the many circumstances he's dealt with low-life thugs and villains. For example, his signature use of puns in the sense of danger to cope with the pressure. Not just that, but his scientist side also shines with the gadget he possesses, the iconic suits he adorns, and his signature web shooters that not only shoot quick bursts of synthetic webs, but also allow him to swing around town as well as assist him during combat. From a combat design perspective, encapsulating all of those elements present a challenge, mainly on how to honor those specific attributes, while at the same time provide fun and challenge through said systems. So we'll break down both categories and see how they click with each other. First, focusing on the encapsulation of ideas into mechanics. Marvel Spider-Man combat can be divided into three major components that both sum up into the overall idea and intention of the systems in place. In this hierarchy showcased, melee serves as the surface layer of its combat system. It's the most obvious one and makes an impression when seeing it for the first time. Second comes gadgets and how they enhance combat as well as helping in some combinations with melee, and finally environmental props, allowing us to use the web shooters to throw objects such as trash bins, manhole covers, and pull stuff such as scaffoldings and cranes when prompted. First, we'll start with melee. Spider-Man is a very agile individual in the comics, movies, and games. All of them make a point to showcase that, especially the Andrew Garfield movies. With agility also comes a level of moveset that only he can perform, moves that could be considered almost inhuman, and the game perfectly adopts that into a framework of a beat-em-up system, while at the same time not so much. So let me explain. The Batman Arkham games, for example, are well known for their great execution of the character, and combat is no different. Batman is a ruthless and straightforward fighter, and most of his combat system is designed around a consistent flow of throwing punches, keeping the combo meter high while also dodging and countering when a prompt appears to maintain the streak. Now mind you that most of the games do not rely on this loop, and more often than not attempt to break it mostly on boss fights, with a big highlight being Mr. Freeze and Arkham City. Spider-Man combat structure is similar, as in it both provides the necessary moves to tackle the situation, while also not overwhelming the player by first highlighting the essential moves before moving on to the more complex combinations as player progress. The same structure also applies to Miles Morales. Besides the latter featuring the same groundwork as Marvel Spider-Man, Miles Morales is embellished by different animations in an otherwise same structure familiar players will quickly get used to. On top of melee, the combat system also features a mechanic named Focus. Focus is a system represented by a bar below the health bar that allows the player to fill it through normal use of melee, gadget and prop attacks, and serves two purposes: to either refuel Spider-Man health or perform finisher attacks, taking out enemies out in one hit. This interesting perspective brings a structure that incentivizes an act of balancing on whenever is the appropriate moment to execute one or the other. This means the game doesn't rely on auto-generating health, further enforcing a challenge on its systems. The game traditionally does not feature a complex combo system with multiple moves exclusive to different button presses such as Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, and instead it thrusts the player into expressing themselves with not just the moves provided, but with the many other tools present. Miles Morales on the other hand presents a whole new additional layer in the middle of this hierarchy that complements the melee layer, with it being the Venom powers. The Venom powers are based on Miles' ability to produce bioelectricity from his fingers and even absorb electricity from other sources. During combat, only one Venom move replaces a traditional move executed by Spider-Man, with it being the Ground Slam, but the rest are brand new moves such as the Venom Jump, Punch, Dash, and Mega Venom Blast, which is available when you have the 3 focus bars filled. And speaking of focus bar, here the bar is only focused on the Venom powers and refilling health, and the finishers are now achievable through high combo counts, with 15 being the minimum requirement to execute a finisher, but there is an upgrade to minimize the requirement. Both Miles Morales and Marvel's Spider-Man also include general abilities thanks to the myriad of suits present in the game. Each suit brings a unique ability with them, varying from purely cosmetic, such as Miles' onomatopoeia, to combat efficient ones such as shooting out boatloads of webs around or refilling gadgets. And speaking of gadgets, it's time we discuss them. Alongside being a formidable fighter, Peter is also avidly dedicated to science, especially research and development. For the 8 years he has become Spider-Man, a ton of iteration, trial and error, and testing took place, resulting in 8 unique gadgets that look and feel different, as well as strongly representing Peter's genius. Gadgets make part of the second tier presented in this combat system, and they fairly contribute to the overall combat structure. The best way to dissect them is by separating them by their utilities. The game presents web-based, electricity-based, and wind-based gadgets. Web-based gadget consists of the web shooters, impact webs, web bombs, and the trip mine. The web shooters are pretty self-explanatory, with it being the most important tool at Spider-Man's disposal, allowing him to swing, shoot webs, and occasional combat moves such as the web strike or disarm gun enemies. Impact webs are pretty much web shooters on steroids, instantly webbing up an enemy and when close to a surface, sticking them onto it. Web bombs wrap enemies in webs when coming close to it, and trip mines automatically snatch enemies once they cross its line of sight. They can also be used to wrap 2 enemies together if you shoot a trip mine at one of the enemies. Electricity based are only 2, being the spider drone that blasts electricity shots at enemies and the electric webs that stun targets and arcs to nearby enemies. And finally, we have the wind-based. I say wind loosely because it's the best way to aggregate both, being the concussive blast that discharges a burst of sonic waves that send enemy flying, and finally the suspension matrix, which traps enemies in the air for a short period. The beauty of everything I just described comes from how you can put it to use during combat. In 1 minute you could use impact webs to trap enemies, or use concussive blasts to throw enemies off a building. The sky's the limit on how players apply them, not just in combat, but in stealth encounters as well. And lastly, we arrive at environmental props. While not majorly significant, props can be thrown at enemies. Their best use is during stealth sections, where the player can pull scaffolding, cranes, and other objects to subdue multiple enemies. Gadgets have minimal effects on them though, so it serves as its own separate branch. Enemy variety also plays a big role in how combat is conducted in different scenarios. Both Marvel's Spider-Man and Miles Morales introduce a multitude of factions, but they are also all based on 3 archetypes with their own subcategories: melee enemies, melee weapons, and firearm enemies. Melee enemies vary from the basic ones that any trick in the book can be pulled on them, and brutes require being webbed up before inputting damage. Melee enemies are pretty fascinating, as they vary from different weapons such as pipes, whips, shields, you name it, and each one requires different strategies. For example, shield enemies need to be ducked under to get them from the back. Swords and whip enemies will 100% deflect your webs until you put them in a stun state. Firearm enemies range from pistols to machine guns and snipers, which give a small window for the player to react accordingly. The end result of this variety presents combat as a puzzle game, and how should players approach each encounter based on the enemy type present. Maybe it'll be easy, take them in the air, far from the other enemies surrounding me. Or, if you're feeling daredevilish, pun intended, you could keep everything boots on the ground, limit yourself of certain abilities, and just explore different ways to take out enemies. This hierarchy achieves the very often difficult concept of improvisation, not only representing Spider-Man's prowess, as well as provide players freedom on how to approach different scenarios. Early on in development, Insomniac knew head-on that their take on Spider-Man would also require a unique combat style for him. Not anything never seen before or mind-blowing, but something that fully conveyed the idea of Spidey's often messy but elegant improvisation style, with creative director Brian Intihar confirming such in an interview with Game Informer. At the beginning, I mentioned how the most talked about point of Marvel's Spider-Man was the web swinging, and how it made you feel like Spider-Man. But combat is a different story, as it requires more strategizing from the player than to simplify it for the sake of it. Your first few hours of the game may feel rough and often challenging due to how much the game demands of you to multitask, but as you progress, you'll start making use of other elements, be more proficient with the different enemy archetypes, and maybe pull off some combo mad Devil May Cry type moments like Gamebreaker God and some of the super insane compilations he posts, showcasing how flexible the combat system can be and how far you can push it to its limits. The best way to sum up this entire structure is by quoting GameMaker's Toolkit on a video about the web swinging he did, while briefly touching on the game's combat system. As he puts it, it doesn't make you feel like Spider-Man, but it lets you feel like Spider-Man. To achieve that fantasy, you need to pursue it and conquer it, and not have it handed to you on a silver platter. Thank you so much for sticking through the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I was kind of uncertain if I had the enough amount of material to cover this video, but I'm kind of glad with the final result, so here's to more. I hope I can make more videos analyzing combat systems from other games. I especially would love to analyze Bayonetta's combat, but that is like really out of my realm with the amount of knowledge that I have right now and the experience that I have with the game. I need to play it more. But anyways, besides that, I'm gonna be uploading regularly. I had to take a quick break because I was moving from my current apartment to a new one in a new country. So yeah, it was a process of, well, I would say like 3 to 4 months. The last half of the year of last year was just dedicated for me moving from my former place to the new one. So I hope I have my setup complete now. I just got my PlayStation 5, and I hope I can start making regular content this year. Happy New Year for those of you, actually. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, having said that, I hope I can continue this frequency of uploads as the year goes by, and yeah, I hope I can see you there. Bye.